Good afternoon, 8th grade students. We are continuing our reading of The Greatest Treasure Hunt in History, The Story of the Monuments Men by Robert M. Edsel. We finished up yesterday on page 8 and 9, and I'm going to start at the top of page 8, first paragraph. Sizer had been among the first selected to serve as a monuments man. The Army had created the Civil Affairs School, where Keller now found himself, to educate American and British officers about military government and how to run a town once combat troops moved on. With their training now complete, Sizer, fellow American Captain Norman Newton, and British monuments man Captain Teddy Croft Murray were on their way to Naples, Italy. Despite the obvious good intentions of leaders in Washington and the monuments men at Tizi Ouzou, everyone questioned whether the mission could succeed. Would Allied commanders listen to the recommendations of middle-aged art history professors or architects to direct artillery fire away from a church or monument when being fired upon? Would Allied troops respect signs the monuments men posted making churches and historical buildings off limits, even if it meant sleeping outside in the rain? And how could just 8 monuments men in an army of more than 200,000 soldiers protect even a portion of the works of art and monuments in culturally rich Italy? After 8 weeks of training, Keller was on his way to Naples to find out. Keller's initial duties involved inspections of nearby towns and villages. These experiences left him feeling sad, not because of the extent of destruction, but out of sympathy for what the Italian people had endured. As an artist, he had always admired the country's beauty and boundless creative achievements, but it was the Italian people who had won his heart so many years earlier. Good people, very good people, he always told his students and the soldiers he met, but you have to know how to take care of them. During one inspection, Keller visited a hospital where he saw a man without a nose. In its place were 2 holes. Before the war, had he seen someone in such sad condition, he would have looked away. But sights such as these were all too common during war. Now, each wounded child, destroyed home, and damaged town made him realize how sheltered and privileged his life had been. The severity of fighting at the town of Cassino, about 70 miles northwest of their headquarters in Naples, had Allied forces pinned down and the monuments men waiting until the battle was over. The only practical route into central Italy and the big prize, Rome, required passage through the Liri Valley. That meant contending with an impregnable mountain bastion overlooking the entire valley, the Abbey of Monte Cassino, and the Germans knew it. Every effort had been made to avoid damage to the Abbey, but General Dwight D. Eisenhower's December 29, 1943 order concerning the protection of cultural treasures made it clear. If we have to choose between destroying a famous building and sacrificing our own men, then our men's lives count infinitely more, and the buildings must go. On the morning of February 15th, waves of Allied bombers severely damaged the Abbey, but the fighting continued for 3 more bloody months. Norman Newton was the first monuments man to reach the heavily mined and booby-trapped Abbey, still under fire from enemy mortars. Just hours after the remaining Germans had been driven out, his damage assessment report painted a grim picture. Reconstruction of entire Abbey is possible, although much is now only a heap of pulverized rubble and dust. The far greater tragedy was the body count. 4 months of fighting and grueling weather conditions had exacted a toll so great it hardly seemed believable. 55,000 Allied soldiers dead, wounded, or missing. 20,000 dead or wounded received new assignments. no, sorry, 20,000 dead or wounded Germans and one historic but largely destroyed 14th century Benedictine abbey. With the stalemate at Cassino ended, Allied forces and the Monuments Men began their advance toward Rome. Several received new assignments. Keller's exceeded all expectations. He would be the first Monuments officer attached to Fifth Army and its fighting force of 80,000 soldiers. So this is a photo of the Monuments Men approach the remains of the Abbey of Monte Cassino, and this is the picture of the letter from General Dwight D. Eisenhower, when he stated that if it was a choice between lives and the buildings, that the buildings would have to go. On his last night in Naples, Keller held up the sleeve of his uniform to the small, dim lamp near his bunk. Needle and thread in hand, he began sewing onto his uniform the shoulder patch for Fifth Army, which he had purchased earlier in the day from a street vendor. I haven't worn my ribbon or shoulder patch yet. Don't know when I will, he had written Kathy. I feel the boys at the front are the ones to wear the stuff. Maybe someday I feel I earned it. That day had finally come. About 1 week into his new assignment, things were going well for Monuments Man Captain Dean Keller. He had the job he wanted, a position of enormous responsibility, and a Jeep, a rarity for the Monuments Men. He swelled with pride serving his country and helping the Italian people, but it came at a high cost. The bloodbath at the Battle of Monte Cassino served as a painful reminder to Keller and his family that he might not see them again, ever. Most of all, he missed being the dad that he promised to be when Dina was born. For now, he resigned himself to writing letters, lots of letters. Each letter to Kathy had a message for Dina, right up until the time he realized that his 3-year-old boy couldn't yet read. A few weeks later, perhaps months, war was like that, the blurring of time. He realized that the solution to communicating with his son wasn't through words, but images. Every boy liked looking at cartoons, and after all, Keller was an artist and an art teacher. So this is a drawing, one of his drawings of himself sewing his army patch onto his uniform. One of Keller's earliest drawings summarized his journey step by step from his trip to North Africa and training at Tizi Ouzou, as he jokingly referred to it, to his work in Italy. With Keller's assignment as a Monuments Man now underway, Dina would be receiving many more drawings. So this is one of the early drawings that Dean Keller created for his son to show him his travels from Africa to Italy. When you have a chance, look at it really carefully. I know we have some amazing artists in 8th grade, and this is interesting how it's really a timeline of his experiences and his travels. Near Palestrina, Italy, June 1944. Somewhere on the road back to headquarters, Keller awakened and quickly checked the pocket of his shirt. The letter from the dead American soldier was still there. It prompted him to write to Kathy as soon as he reached his tent. He began his June 25th letter by recounting some of the experiences of his first few weeks as a Monuments Man. With the death of the young soldier fresh on his mind, the tone of his letter changed. He wanted to share with Kathy something he'd been thinking about. The life of one American boy is worth infinitely more to me than any monument I know. Keller thought of it as a personal manifesto of sorts, one that would guide him in his work as a Monuments Man. Rome, Italy, June 1944. Monuments Men Lieutenant Perry Cott, British Captain Humphrey Brooke, and Lieutenant Fred Hart, who had joined the operation late April, couldn't believe they were in Rome. Not under these conditions. Like Keller, Cott and Hart had each visited the city during their time as students, but those experiences couldn't compare with the exhilaration of accompanying Fifth Army troops into the Eternal City. It had taken the Western Allies 6 months to blast through Monte Cassino before sprinting north to Rome. The first units fought their way into the city on the morning of June 4th, liberating it by late afternoon. The sound of the deliriously happy throngs of people cheering as the tank column of a modern army motored past the almost 1,900-year-old Colosseum left Hart, Cott, and Brooks speechless. But the appearance of the Arch of Constantine and Trajan's column and many of the city's other landmarks wrapped in protective casing made of bricks, sandbags, and scaffolding brought them back to the reality of the war and their mission. While Brooke and Hart set out to conduct damage assessments, Cott began gathering information on the status of works of art. The Vatican and its collection, one of the most comprehensive and important holdings of art in the world, were safe. So too were the treasures of the Brera Picture Gallery in Milan, the Accademia in Venice, and the Bourgeois Gallery in Rome, and those from many of the nation's most important churches, which Pope Pius VII had allowed to be stored for safekeeping within the Vatican's walls. Cott, a seasoned museum curator and art scholar, was astonished at the thought that with these combined holdings, the Vatican was the richest museum in the world, at least for the moment. Monuments man Lieutenant Colonel Ernest de Waal, director of the MFAA in Italy, reached Rome several days later. After presenting his credentials to the Holy Father and explaining the purpose of the monument's operation, he and Cott gained access to the Vatican storage areas. On June 26, they began their investigation into works of art belonging to museums in Naples that the Hermann Göring Tank Division had delivered to Rome for safekeeping. Suspicions abounded. The media spectacle surrounding the Hermann Göring Tank Division's arrival was Nazi propaganda at its best. They seldom missed a chance to promote a good deed done. But when 2 trucks of this elite fighting unit mysteriously disappeared on the way to Rome with the artwork, it greatly concerned Italian art officials, especially since it involved a division named for Hermann Göring, the Nazi Party's second most powerful man and the most prolific art collector in the world. After a quick look at the crates that Hermann Göring Division had delivered to Rome in January, de Waal and Cott began inventorying the contents, starting with crate number 1. A few minutes passed before de Waal looked at Cott, puzzled. Crate number 1, which according to their inventory schedule had been packed with paintings, was with 3 paintings. It's completely missing. That hardly seemed an accident. Later, they opened crate number 29, relieved to find one of the paintings that belonged in the missing crate number 1. A second of the missing paintings appeared in crate number 58. But they never found the third and most important painting, the world-famous masterpiece by Peter Bruegel, the Elder, The Blind Leading the Blind. There can be no doubt that the paintings were stolen by persons who knew just what they wanted, de Waal told court in disbelief. The thieves clearly had a shopping list. What else could explain that in several instances they had left behind paintings of far greater importance? Hiding the works that they didn't want in crates with extra space was a cover-up attempt, as clumsy as the thief itself. De Waal and Cott were gobsmacked by the audacity of the theft. In all, 17 works of art from Naples and the ancient site of Pompeii were missing, a few of which were among the most recognizable works of art in the world. The Hermann Göring Division soldiers might as well have driven to Naples, backed up their trucks to the doors of the Museo Nazionale in broad daylight, and lifted the masterpieces off the wall. Both de Waal and Cott believed that their works of art were in Nazi Germany, probably recent additions to the ever-growing collection of Reichsmarshal Hermann Göring. Reports of Nazi looting throughout Europe were hardly new, but the Vatican inventory provided the monuments men with the first hard evidence that the Nazis had looted art treasures in Italy. With German troops now retreating north toward Florence, the monuments men feared that this was just the beginning. I'm going to stop there on page 19. The next chapter is Independence Day, English Channel, July 4th, 1944. Thank you for following along. Read ahead if you like. This is a very compelling story, a true story, historical fiction. Thank you so much, and let's read again tomorrow. Take care.